I did want to show you a trick for working with objects that are really large inside of Maya LT. So sometimes you'll notice that if you have an object that was built to scale, so like for instance we had talked about this object originally was built to be at least 3 meters tall inside of Maya LT. And as you can see, as we start to kind of work with this guy, we get a lot of Z-fighting is going on in here. It's very distracting. So one of the things that you could do to fix that is simply just select this camera icon here at the top of your viewport. And what that will do is it'll select the camera that you're looking through in this particular viewport. And then to get rid of that Z-fighting, all you do is you come over to this near clip plane and you set this to 1. So as soon as you set that to 1, that's going to fix that Z-fighting issue, and it's going to make things a lot smoother. Also, if you start to just zoom away too much, you'll see that we start to get hit with this far clip plane. So just add a couple extra zeros in there, and that'll fix that as well. So again, just if you get into an issue where your objects are very, very large in the scene, and Maya LT starts to have that Z-fighting problem, just go into that camera and select the near clip plane and set it to 1. Alright, so moving right along, we've talked about sending our objects here over to Unity. We've talked about the scale and how to set that up appropriately. The next thing I want to talk about is that when you bring these objects in, the way that there's a difference between the Z-axis. So basically that's it's flipped. So we need to be able to rotate our objects 180 degrees when we come out of Maya LT into Unity. So let's just take this object for example, and let's just select all of these guys here. So we're going to select each one of these, and we're going to just export this selection. So again, we'll use our marking menu, we'll export selection, and we'll call this, I don't know, we'll just call this hallway this time. And we'll spell it right, and we'll say hallway, and we'll just export this selection over. We'll come over to Unity, and you can see this guy shows up. We'll just drag this into our view, and we'll just kind of rotate the scene here so that we can see the game object as well as the camera. So what you can see is our camera, if we select this guy, we're basically flipped. So the entire asset is basically 180 degrees in the wrong direction. And so what we could do is just come right over here, and if we take a look at the hierarchy, we can see here is our basically a game object here where we have all of our assets underneath of that. We could just rotate that. But something you might want to do is just think about that 180 degree rotation is going to take place, and just take care of that inside of Maya. So here's something that I'll typically do is I usually group all these assets that I'm working with anyways. So say that we have all of these objects. So all of these objects here, they actually make up a portion of the game object. So what I might do is just hit Control G to group these guys, and I might name this hallway, or we'll just say main hallway. So we got some type of name here. And what we can do at this point is, before we export this guy, is here in our channel box, and we could do that in the attribute editor. I just prefer the channel box, but we'll come over here to our rotate Y, and then we'll just type in 180. So we just flip this guy, we'll do a freeze transformation on that, and now instead of just selecting each individual one of these guys, we could just select this main, this entire main group. We'll hold down the U key to bring open our marking menu, and we'll export this selection. And then let's just overwrite this guy, so it'll just update for us, and we'll just say, yeah, we want to replace that guy. Let's go back over to Unity, and now you can see that it flipped for us. Now the important thing here is that underneath our hallway here, you can see that our rotations are all zeroed out. So if we take a look at each one of these guys, our rotation and our scale is all 1, and our rotation is all zeroed out, which is very important in terms of how we want this guy to be set up. So here at our main group, you can see that everything again is all zeroed out. And so that's just something else to keep in mind, that you will need to flip that because of the way that Maya and Unity's Z-axis, the positive and negative, is basically flipped. Now, before we move on to some other topics, I want to talk just briefly about triangulation. So the triangulation is going to be different between Maya and Unity, and you need to be very aware of that. So for instance, say we have a mesh, and we're going to actually bake our normal map inside of Maya. We're going to want to triangulate that mesh before we bake the normal map, and we want to be sure that that mesh and the winding order is the same. Once that gets exported into Unity, we want to make sure that that's the same as what was used when the normal map was baked. And so, for instance, if we were to take this mesh here, and let's just go ahead and just export this selection here. I'll just keep this at box, and we'll export this over here to Unity. We'll bring this guy in here, and you can see that here's this box in place. And I want you to take a look at the winding order of where these triangles are. So it's not actually going to be the same as Maya LT. So here, back in Maya LT, we'll come over here to our mesh, and we'll hit triangulate. And so here you can take a look at, here's the front, and here's the back that we're looking at. You can see the winding order is actually just reversed as it was in Unity. So you can see here the difference. And so one of the things that you'll want to do is before you actually export your items, especially if you're using normal maps, you'll want to go ahead and just make sure that you triangulate. So again, that's under Mesh, triangulate. Again, something that we can just add to our shelf. So here's where we'll just add that item to our shelf. And so we'll make sure that we triangulate this before we send it. So here we go. We'll go ahead and just go ahead and send this selection. And this time we'll just replace box. We'll go back over to Unity, and you can see that that winding order flipped. And so now it's actually matching my LT. So as we flip back and forth between Unity and my LT, you can see that our triangulation order is correct. Now let's go ahead and start talking about how we can actually build our levels up, how we can align items, and also let's talk about our pivot adjustment. So if we select this item, you can see where the pivot is located based off this transform manipulator. Now if I hold down the D key, that puts me into pivot mode, and I can actually just adjust and move this pivot anywhere that I want. And so for instance, let's say that I want to adjust this pivot way down here at this corner, so I'll just go ahead and do that just real quickly here. So I'll just snap this pivot. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now if I hit the rotate key, it can actually just rotate, and you can see that that pivot location is where our rotate is going to be affected from. And that's something you'll want to set up quite often on a lot of your different types of objects. Think about a door and how the door needs to open. So once you have these pivot locations set, those locations will be respected once the FBX file is loaded back into Unity. So you can actually set all these pivot locations right here within inside of my LT. And so with that said, I also want to talk about how we can actually utilize the pivot and snapping to align some items. So here we have this wall selected, and what I would like to do is be able to just snap and move or duplicate this wall and snap and move it to this other side. So here's the way I do this. Like I said, I don't really utilize the align tool. I actually just work with the snapping tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the D key. Now again, like I said, that puts me into pivot snap mode. And then I also have a couple different formats or ways that, or modes, better said, that we can actually work with. So if we hold down the V key, you can see here at the top, we can go into edge snapping by hitting the C key. So that's snap to curves or edges. But what I want to do is I want to take this transform manipulator and I want to snap it to a vertex here. So what I'll do is I'll hold down D and then I'll hold down V. As you can see here again, here's the button. And now I could just simply just hit the middle mouse button and just select a vertex. So we'll just middle mouse, click and drag, and it snaps right to that point. So now I have that set up. So what I would do now is just duplicate the mesh by hitting either Command D on the Mac or Control D on the PC. And then we'll just simply vert snap this wall over to the other side. And so in this case, all I got to do now is just hold down the V key, and I can actually just vert snap that to any vertex. It doesn't even have to be the object that's selected, so anything in the scene. And another thing that's very cool about this is that I can actually pick which axis I want to snap constraint. So in this case, I only want to snap across the x-axis, so I will select the x-axis handle, and then I'll just simply just middle mouse click and drag and just select one of these vertices. And then there you go, I'm snapped. I'll hit F key to focus this. And then I was able to just snap a line that wall right over to the other side. And that's typically how I'll work with these type of things. I won't have to actually use the align tool. I'll just go through and just use the snapping. I'll adjust my pivot and then just snap the items to where I want them to go. And then sometimes I will constrain the axis depending on which way or what type of constraints I want to put on top of that snap action. And the usage of the snapping tools becomes very fluid and fast once you start using it often. In terms of mesh creation and snapping to a surface, I'll often use the Make Live feature. So if I select an object and I come up here to the top and I just click this magnet button, and you can see that that makes this surface live, I can't really select it in the viewport anymore because this item has gone into this live state where I can now draw mesh or topology right over top of this. And so I use this as I use this method a lot as a construction plane, so to speak. So let's just take a look at this section here where we have kind of like this angled piece here, and let's say I want to start to draw another box on top of this. So now all I can do is just shift right click and I can do polycube, and I can just drag directly onto this surface and just pull this right out here. So you can see that it allows me to quickly align objects in terms of actually creating new meshes directly onto this object. And as I said before, I often use this Make Live feature as a construction plane for creating topology. Okay, so let's switch gears again, and this time we're going to talk about topology and also polygon reduction. So there's a really nice tool up underneath Mesh, and we have Reduce and the Paint Reduce Weights tool. And I'll use these tools often to reduce polygons in my mesh. And so here I have this mesh I created, and basically if we look at the polygons to this, we have about 211,000 polys. And so what I'll do is I'll typically take a mesh like this and I'll break apart pieces of it, and I'll use the Reduce tool to further refine that poly count to that. And so let's go ahead and just select this mesh. We'll go into the face mode and also double click a face to select the shell of this entire piece. And then we'll do a mesh, and then we'll do an extract. So we'll just break that out into its own mesh item. It's always best to kind of work with this thing in pieces instead of trying to do a reduction of the entire thing. So with this guy selected, here we'll just select this other piece here. We'll just hide that. And now we have this single piece here that we want to work with. So let's go over to Mesh, and let's go to Reduce, and let's click the option box on this. And I'm just going to go through and I'll just reset the settings. And so first thing we want to do is I'm going to turn on Keep Original. What that'll do is it will take or basically make a copy of the reduced mesh. So we'll retain our original. We'll have the new reduced mesh as a copy, but we'll also, and more importantly, have a history link there between the two so that we can more interactively adjust this percentage value of the reduction, as well as use the Reduce Paint Weights tool. And for our reduction method, we have a few options here. We've got percentage, so we can reduce by a percentage. We can reduce by a vertex limit or a triangle limit. I'm going to go ahead and leave this at percentage, and I'll put this at probably like 75%. Preserve quads. This is my favorite feature here. So we can actually keep this at 1, which means that it's going to preserve all quads. So what it's going to output is a quad mesh. If we were to take this all the way down to 0, it's basically just turning that off, so it's just going to, triangulate the mesh. So we're going to go ahead and, like I said, keep this over here at 1. We also have, well, here, let me just say one thing here. If we keep this preserve quads less than 1, we actually have the option to use a symmetry type. So if you need to, or it's very important to keep a symmetry across within the reduction across the object, you can do that. So you can do automatic, or you can do it based off a plane here. So if, for instance, if we switch to plane, we have a symmetry plane that we can choose from. But we're not going to worry about that, because the way I work it is I kind of do this a piece at a time. So again, we'll go ahead and pull this all the way up to 1. And so now that we have this done, we'll go ahead and hit Reduce, and you can see that it's already done all the work for us. So here again, we have our original selected. We're at 4,320 polys. We select the new version, and now we're at 1,000, let's see here, yeah, 1,056 polys. So pretty nice reduction, and we retained the overall shape pretty well. And so, like I said, I'll use this as a refinement tool. We could also go back to that poly reduce on this guy, and we could actually change this even more. So let's say we want to put this at maybe, say, 80%. So you can see just by doing that, we get a little bit more reduction to that. Now, if you want to be able to control this even more, we can actually utilize the weight painting tools. So let's go ahead and select our original. Before we do this, I'm going to turn on wireframe on shaded so we can kind of see what's happening here to this reduction. I'm going to go over to Mesh, and I'm going to go to my Paint Reduce Weights tool. And so now this opens up basically the artisan brushes, and I can actually paint a value on here. So value of 1, meaning white, is going to be what's reduced. So let's say that we want to try to maybe reduce some of these polys underneath here. Let's see if we can actually do that without destroying too much. So we'll come underneath this area here, and I'll just start to kind of just paint in this general area, and as soon as I let go of my mouse, you'll see that it will actually start to reduce. So here we go. We started to get some reduction here. It's just depending on what edge loops I'm actually kind of hitting on this. So here we go. We got some more reduction here. Just want to make sure that we don't destroy the mesh too much. But it's really nice that we can interactively adjust this tool here, or use this Paint Weights tool to actually adjust or interactively change the reduction that we have going on here. So there we go. We reduce some just by painting there. And we'll come across here. Still want to try to keep as much of this shape as possible. Let's see if we can remove any of these guys. Okay, not much happening there. Let's try this. Go. Move some more on that way. And let's see if we can't just get a few in this area here. Probably if we just grab right in this front part area. All right, that's way too much, so we can just undo that. So there we go. We'll probably just leave it like this. We go through our reduction here. And now we'll go ahead and just drop that tool and we'll select, and now you can see that we're down to 756. So here's the item that we end up getting by using that Poly Reduce tool. So like I said, it's a pretty handy feature. I use it a lot, and for me, the secret to using it is to take your complex mesh item and break it into very small pieces and then work it from there. So for instance, if we were to go through, I'll come back and do my show, let's see, show last hidden here. So we have this piece here. Instead of doing the reduction again on this side, what I can then do is just take this object and I would just mirror it over to the side. Same thing with this wing. I would do the poly reduction on this wing and then just mirror it over to the side. So it's just kind of a way for me to, if I get an asset that I didn't particularly create or something that I don't want to have to just manually retopologize, I could go through and use this mesh reduce tool to go through and kind of get me in the ballpark of where I want to be fairly quickly. The last thing I would like to cover is how we can actually create new topology. So we're going to use this same piece that we had previously. We'll select this and we'll go ahead and click the Make Live Surface. So again, this is not selectable, but we can now snap new topology right over top of this. Now, a really good tool for working with topology is the Quad Draw tool found in the modeling toolkit. You can actually use any of the modeling tools will work with a live surface, but modeling, as far as modeling goes, the Quad Draw tool has quite a few tools kind of built into one. So for instance, we can actually just start to lay down some points by just simply just left clicking on the surface. You can see that I can start to just create a little quad strip here. So I've got some points. I'll hold down the shift key and I'll just drag across and I'll just create some quads. I can hold down the middle mouse button to manipulate the vertices, the entire face itself, or the edges. We can also have the ability to extend edges. So if I hold down Control Shift, I can actually just start to pull these edges out this way. I could also pull them out as an entire row. So you can see that we can work with an entire loop. Now if I do Control Shift and right click, you can see that we get this nice marking menu that allows us to work with single edges or loops. So in this case, let's go down to Extend Edge, and you can see that we can now just pull out an edge. I can even grab a vertice if I like, and I can just pull out a quad this way as well. So you have the ability to work with just a single edge or an entire loop of edges. So another thing that I can do is I can also just hold down the Shift key, and you can see that I can preview where I might want to put a cut or a split. So right here at this area here, let's go ahead and just put a split in here, and again we might just start to kind of tweak a few of these vertices as we go. You can see that we're also, without any of the modifier keys held down, I can just click the left mouse button and I can relax these vertices if I like. So I'm just going to undo that. And I'm going to go to my Shift Control right click to go into that marking menu, and I can change how that relax is working, whether it be through interior vertices, border vertices, or I can relax all. So right now you can see that we're working with, again, Quad Draw. We have this Overlay Append Mesh option here in the Quad Draw, which allows us to see our new topology over top of our background. So if I toggle that on and off, you can see that it gets really kind of difficult to see what we're doing. If we turn that back on, at least we can start to see a little bit better how some of this topology is overlaid this live mesh. However, I've got a little tip I'd like to share with you on how I actually work with this, so I don't really rely too much on this. So what I do is I'm going to go to Object Mode, and I'm going to select our new mesh, and I'm going to apply a new material to this. So I'm going to come over here to my materials, and I'm going to apply a Shader Effects material. And so with that selected, I'm going to go all the way over here. Here, let's do this. Let's first go to Unity and let's delete history. So all that history we've been creating, let's just delete history on our mesh. So we'll grab this guy and we'll delete history. We'll go to our Shader Effects, and you can see here that we can now open up Shader Effects. Now Shader Effects allow us to create shaders, very much like what you would see inside of Unity. It's really good for prototyping shader effects and things like that, but I'm going to use it just so I can create a new shader that allows me to better visualize my topology that I'm working with. So I already have a graph made for this. So I'm going to go ahead and just import this. This is just something that I just have on my system I use often. So I'll import graph. For right now I have it on the desktop. We'll grab it and we'll put it in, and you can see it's just very simple. Basically we have a color that's getting fed into the diffuse color. Also have a color set to black that's just taking out all specular color, and then finally I have a value here that's getting clamped between 0 and 1 that's being fed into the opacity. And so now I'll go ahead and just close this out, and you can see that we now have the attributes of color and opacity. Now, so that I can actually see this over top, I'm going to go ahead and take my depth test and turn that off. Now I can actually see this. I can go through and I can change the color, or I can drop the opacity of this. So let's go ahead and change our color to something like maybe like a blue or so. So we'll change that and we'll adjust our opacity. Something else that I do is I have this selected. I will go right into the shape node for this underneath the mesh component display, and I will display vertices, and I'll usually put this up to something kind of high, like maybe 8, so I can see the vertices. Now, when we go back to our modeling toolkit and we go into Quadral, you can see that now we get a much better surface here for working with topology, and it's a lot easier to work with. So now we can go through and we can start extending our edges, and we can start working with this topology just in a way that just works a bit better. It's a lot easier to work with. So again, that's just a little tip I was going to share with you here on how I use shader effects to create my own topology shader for my LT. Well, that's going to wrap up this MyLT video for Unity developers on asset workflows. We discussed several workflow tips. As a quick recap, remember that units are arbitrary. You simply decide what a unit represents and use the scale factor in Unity to convert that scale. The vert snapping tools in MyLT work much like Unity's vert snap tool, and it's a good technique for aligning items. Also, Poly Reduce can help quickly lower the resolution of a mesh and provide a good starting point for retopology. Thank you for watching.